Okay, welcome back to some Coast to Coast, a series where we go over the maps, basic approaches, how to play them, what different holds look like, and yeah, pretty much covering a map from your own last to pushing into the other team's last. So, as per usual, we are going to start with the callouts. Here we are on the last point. Of course, there's two spawn doors, so it's going to be left or right spawn, depending on whether you're defending or attacking. Of course, this is left if you're attacking, but if you're defending, this is right instead. You have the point, you have behind the point. Just normal directional type of callouts. Top left, this door is dungeon, and then right side. So as you could call this fence, maybe even like billboard, based on how it looks. But that's a position that soldiers are likely to be on top of when holding this last. And then going forward, let's go top left here. I suppose there could be callouts for this region as well. Yeah, this isn't a map I have played a full season of, but I have casted a lot of it and watched a lot of it, so I understand how teams like to play on it, but I don't know what the teams are calling things while they're playing it necessarily. In any case, we are in lobby here. There's a little hiding spot here. There's a little bit of like straw on that. I don't know if that's, might indicate a call out for it, but there is a hiding spot that needs to get checked. Of course, dungeon connects to lobby as well. And here we have a shutter. When there's a shutter, you tend to just call it a shutter. So yeah, you just call that shutter. This little area, it makes sense to call this bats for me because it's very related geometry-wise to other batses in the game. So bats make sense. And over here, this region usually gets called Valley, I believe, which connects to last, but it also connects into lobby, but it isn't a part of lobby necessarily. Of course, you have forward spawns here. You have the point. And then from here, there's a few doors connecting into mid. So this door gets called cheese, or this area gets called cheese because of this. Personally, I think this should be called like big door, but at this point the community's kind of decided it's cheese, so that's what it is. This area, all connected together, is called frog, which, is there an example of a little frog hiding out here? I know there is on the other side. I don't know if there is on the blue side. Oh, there it is. So yeah, you can see a little frog hiding in there. But this connector is called frog. And of course, this looks like a choke, it acts like a choke, it is a choke, it gets called choke. So, as far as the point itself, I mean, this whole region, of course, is called second, but this specific, like, elevated region, you could call it, like, the point itself, but, like, plat or platform is usually a go-to call for this type of deal, so that could very well be the case for that. Then, moving on to mid. Of course, cheese connects to mid, choke connects to mid, and frog connects to mid behind the tower here. You have the point itself. You have under the point, which is a region that players can occupy, aggress across. And then this is a spot. This reminds me of, so in EU actually, the area, so Valley and Sunshine usually just gets called Valley, but the specific elevated part of Valley in EU gets called Flowers. This is very reminiscent of that, and I suppose you could call this Flowers, or just like Catwalk seems a little strange, I suppose. But probably something worth having a call out for. Again, this is a little spot that people can be at. A little paint bucket here, maybe you call it paint bucket. I don't know. Yeah, a lot of just directional type of callouts. Usually visibility on this map is pretty solid. It's easy to see a lot of things from a lot of things. So I think that's about it for all the callouts I can think of here on Sultry. So let us return to last and talk about the rollout to mid, and then we'll talk about the mid fight. And then after the mid fight, we will go from last to the other team's last, just talking about all the different points. So for the rollout, teams will roll out left-sided, through lobby, through shutter, and then usually through cheese. This is what like 95% of teams do that I've seen, and the reason for that being cheese is already on this high ground as opposed to choke, you enter through that low ground. And also, cheese has a lot of visibility. You have visibility, I guess you can see a sliver of choke, but you can see the entire other side of the point. All the high ground that's important, you can see. What you don't see is players in this area, outside Frog. So flank players, well, we'll get into that when we talk about the mids. But cheese is a nice place to roll out because it gives you a lot of visibility and it gives you nice positioning and good high ground early on. Versus choke, where you just don't really see anything when you show up and you're just in this corner. So it's very difficult to tell what's going on. And you would want to walk up here anyway, so you may as well just come out the door that just leads you directly there. As far as Frog goes, theoretically, you could play a very aggressive, like think of their side mid on Gully Wash, where you walk up the other team's side. You could theoretically do something like that, where you just try to get up on their side with soldier bombs and just take this space very quickly for a very aggressively oriented mid. That's not something I've seen at all in Invite, but I do think that is possible. Of course, the walk-up's going to be a little tough just because it is such a narrow corridor you're occupying, but I think that is something teams could theorize with and maybe make work. But yeah, by and large, cheese is where pretty much everyone rolls out just to play their standard type of mid. And yeah, while we're here, let's talk about the mid fight. So I did talk about like the theoretical very aggro mid walking up their side from Frog. I think that is possible, but I'm going to talk about the mids that we usually see. And by and large, there's mid styles, I suppose, and this applies to pretty much every mid, where you want to either play reactively or aggressively. And what that means is if you're playing reactively, your soldiers are ready to bomb, but not planning to bomb, meaning you are kind of waiting to see what happens, what the other team does. So if, for instance, your demo gets a ton of damage on an important player, then your soldiers might just bomb them, and then your team walks forward to aggress with the space the bombs are buying. A more aggressive approach would be your soldiers initiating the aggression. Maybe you don't get any specific damage, or they don't aggress you first. So you are the aggressors in that situation, and you could be high bombing your soldiers. Of course, pretty much any wall you can be high bombing off of as a soldier. So there are a lot of good high bombs there. And yeah, I mean, I don't want to boil down the mids to just double bomb and walk forward, and then, you know, the only decision making is when or how you double bomb in reaction to what, or just choosing to yourself, because that's not the case. But that is a very basic approach and a very basic plan that is easy to follow. There are definitely other things you can do. For instance, you can get players behind, just like you could on pretty much any other mid. Frog here seems like a pretty natural way to get behind. There is just a pack waiting for you there. Now, of course, if their flank rolls out Frog, then that might be a challenge. Just the same way that, you know, a team could roll out a scout and process IT to stop a soldier from going behind there. Just stuff like that can happen. But getting players behind is an option. And likewise, choke could actually be an option as well for getting behind, just because you can get such good high bombs, I feel like. But Frog probably more reliable. And then, of course, well, let's talk briefly about positioning, because You can see I just kind of like lock into demo and like to stand in places that demo stands in because I play demo. And this is a very natural spot to stand in because you can just see a lot. You can shoot a lot. But you're not so forward that you're going to be like a massive target. People are going to want to spam you, but they're going to have a tougher time. You're going to have a much easier time reacting and dodging that spam. So this is a very nice place to be at. And then, of course, when you're aggressing forward, you can walk forward on the point. Depending on how well your aggression is going, depending on how well your soldier bombs are going, you might want to continue crossing just for like a immediate collapse. But sometimes you might just trade out some picks and you're not going to be able to like collapse immediately, and this might be the furthest you'd want to go. And just let your team sort of collect themselves and then either continue or back up if the bombs are bad, so as you're not caught, just stuff like that. As far as a medic positioning goes, it's usually a medic positioning is just with like the same as the demo positioning, but a couple steps back. So from here, you can still kind of beam everyone. You can still do whatever, but you are much less a priority target for spam. Well, you're a priority for spam because people like spamming meds, of course, but it's going to be much harder to spam you when you're behind all your teammates and you can see it all coming and dodge that all. So yeah, just a step back from your demo is a nice positioning to have. As far as Pocket Scout goes, pretty much on a mid, your Pocket Scout wants to be on height. There's some nice little height or high ground positions here, maybe even on that fence, but that's going to be a little tougher to pull off. But by and large, you want to be on high ground so that you can not only, because high ground is just powerful positioning where it's harder to get shot from and easier to shoot people from, but because it makes denying bombing soldiers way easier because you are just closer to them. And it's just very easy to jump off height, double jump back onto height, stuff like that. Just deny those bombs. Because by and large, your main job as a Pocket Scout on mid is to make sure their soldiers do not get a good bomb off. And only when their soldiers are accounted for. So let's say, let's say you and one of their soldiers. So each team trades out a soldier, right? Down a soldier. So there's only one soldier left on each team. And you see their soldier, let's say... has to like back up for a pack or something. You know that soldier is not a bombing threat, so you don't have to be prioritizing that bomb at the moment. But when their soldiers are unaccounted for, or if they are accounted for but in a position where they can bomb, then you definitely have to be looking out for that bomb. So yeah, Pocket Scout, you just want to be playing height, you want to be playing near your medic, you want to be prioritizing those bombs, and you can totally help with a cross. But again, main priority is those bombing soldiers. As for Flank Scout, similar case to Pocket Scout, but you have a lot of options for sure, because you can totally help out with the bombs if your team has trouble with the soldiers. You could just play both soldiers to deny their scouts, and you could both play high ground, either different positions or wherever. Or you could be more aggressive, so you can totally be playing on the right side of mid and playing to like get aggressive, maybe pressure their demo who should be pretty close around this corner. So that's definitely something you can do, or even maybe lurking under the point a little bit where you might not be spotted to get right up in their face during some type of commit. All sorts of stuff. Flank Scout on mids is usually a pretty dynamic class where there's a lot of things you could be doing that would be effective, but you can only ever do one real like plan per mid. Of course, you can like rotate around to do different things, but you can only be doing one thing at a time out of many options. So Flank Scout does have a lot of options to just play with your roamer on the side or something, or under point, or deny their soldiers, all sorts of things. So yeah, as far as soldier positioning goes, that's going to be very dependent, honestly. So a pocket soldier could be playing some type of height where they can play spam, right? And then, drop down bomb, do whatever. I think the soldier positioning is very fluid. Like, it doesn't necessarily matter if your pocket is like closer to the combo or your roamer or what. But usually the pocket is a little closer to the combo. That just is what tends to happen. It's what people tend to prefer, but it's not like the biggest deal. Roamer, I think, does, like, you totally can play the flank side of the map, and this corner could give some pretty lethal spam if they don't have people accounting for you on those roofs. But even like a pocket scout on that roof, for instance, you can splash them with rockets from pretty relative safety as well, like back here. So you can do a good job of controlling the other team's roof to make bombs more effective. And then just like normal kind of positionings you might want to be at, where you can play good spam while not being too vulnerable to getting shoved or spammed out yourself. So yeah, that is, I think, all the positioning on mid. Yeah, it's a pretty intuitive mid to fight. Of course, there is some dynamic with like the potential of controlling this area that's just right around that corner, but you can't really see it without committing too far forward that you're going to get really spammed from the other team. So there could be plans to like shove their flank, collect those picks, and then like continue forward if they are just lingering here, because they are very isolated. So plans like that, just counter strats like that, are definitely things to try out. But I think that's going to be it for mid. Let us return to last and talk about the last hold. So we are going to start with Disad on last, and let me make sure we are recording this perfect. Suppose I waited, 15 minutes before checking, but oh well. So Disad last. On any Disad last hold, you want a sentry gun up, and you want your combo not caught to an Uber, and building their Uber, and you want traps on point. So that's what any Disad last hold on any map looks like. So your demo wants to trap up the point. You want to be building a sentry gun, and usually with Disad holds, the sentry placement is different from an evens hold, because on an evens hold, your gun is going to be much more forward, actually watching doors actively, but you just don't really have the time to set those types of guns up in Disad situations usually. So you instead just build it outside the spawn. Typically, I'm trying to think of where I've seen Disad guns. I have seen Disad guns here a lot, this is a solid spot for sure for a Disad gun, because it watches the point. It's not readily spammable from, I suppose, like you can, spam it with sticks from over this fence, but from a lot of positionings, it's hard to spam unless you're just very committed, in which case it might even just be shooting you. So it is a big priority for an Uber to take out, and it's not trivial to take out either. So if you have time, if you get that gun to level 3 and they aren't pushing yet, so let's say they catch your med on second with an Uber, so they have full ad, but they don't have Uber yet, and they're not immediately pushing last, that means they're going to be building this Uber. That means you have time to get a gun up in some type of position. That's a pretty solid position to put it in. But for most other applications, just a sentry gun outside of the spawn is what you're looking for. Typically, it's good practice to put the gun on the opposite side of the Uber, or rather the combo, because then that divides their attention. So if your combo is playing back left, which I'm not sure which side teams prefer to hold on. I think either could work, back left or back right, with the gun on the opposite side. But point being, if you divide their attention, they can no longer just like focus the gun and try and catch players in like the same motion. They would have to cross to do both. Since top left is kind of actually dungeon is a popular door. Yeah, I typically see teams playing back left. Because if they do focus the gun and they can't cross, there's like a chance. If you can play a post positioning where you're top left, you're very happy with that, versus back right is just not high ground at all, which is a little worse. But Back right is definitely less vulnerable to immediate bomb. So there's some trade-offs there, but I think most teams do prefer back left and then kiting through spawn. I do think if you have the disad gun set up there, then it would be a good idea to be playing right side perhaps, just because they're gonna have to prioritize their attention over there. And you can probably be pretty safe on this side. In any case, main objective of a disad hold is, well, let's talk about other positioning as well. Generally, you want someone building that could be a demo with the half Zatoichi. That could be a pocket scout, or just any remaining scout if your pocket scout's an engineer. If you want to have actually sniper on this last, maybe right shutter is better. Okay, you can stop a dry right side, which I don't think is super common. Sniper doesn't seem too good on this last. Point being, usually you just have a sniper in the spawn shutter just to take one shot and then back up, right? But here, in order to actually be a threat top left, you have to be pretty committed out, in which case you will be caught to a bomb as a sniper. So maybe right side it seems pretty solid, but left side you definitely have to be pretty committed and probably caught in order to get that peek off. And a lot of teams are just going to be popping through that door anyway if they go there. In any case, yeah, you want combo to be building somewhere safe. And then as far as soldiers go, soldiers' main job is to first ensure a force if they walk through the door. So if they were trying to milk left, you would definitely want soldiers to be spamming this. And number two, which is like number one in importance, it's very important that your soldiers are surviving, because their entire job on the last is, yeah, you want to get that force with spam, but soldiers mainly exist to deny the point. Basically, the way a last push goes as far as pacing goes is a team will take in an Uber, get their positioning set up, and then from there, they're going to want to either commit across if they haven't crossed yet, and pressure the point, or they crossed previously, in which case there's going to be a lot of point pressure going on. And during those intervals where there's point pressure before the defending team has like actual positioning established to take a proper fight, it is on the soldiers, and I suppose the one sticky trap that the demo has set up, but usually that's the first to go. It's on the soldiers to deny the point as long as they can, so usually coordinating who's going when. If someone has to resupply, then the other soldier knows that they have to be on point duty. Just stalling the point long enough that the defending team can actually set up proper positioning to fight that point. So staying alive as a soldier on last is critically important, and that involves a lot of jumping around, a lot of playing positions where you are not a priority target, or if someone wants to chase you, you jump away. Just living, trying to stay as healthy as possible so you can contest the point. So yeah, that's your main job on this last as soldier, and then just coordinating who's watching what door, stuff like that. And that's pretty much it for the positioning on last, the basic last hold principles, which pretty much apply the same on every map, but in some specifics. Yeah. Okay, then, let's talk about the evens hold. So, typically, you have your combo top left, and your demo is going to be holding this door. Roamer and Pocket. Pocket on most last holds kind of just fills the gaps, so they're going to rotate over to like do what the Roamer was doing when the Roamer's weak, or if they, in the case that they die or something, Pocket's going to pick up that slack. Typically, Roamer's going to be holding this door. Dungeon should be pretty trivial to hold for a soldier as well. It's pretty easy to hold both, honestly, just because that is just such like super low ground that you can just spam it out pretty easily. Yeah, that's the basic setup. So if you were to approach demo left side, and then pocket just in charge of dungeon, and then roamer just in charge of this door, and then when one soldier is spammed out and has to leave, the other can pick up the slack. Or in the case of they're pressuring for a sack, your roamer can be thinking about maybe a fast counter sack or thinking about that counter sack, and then your pocket picks up his door while it's happening, even if he's not necessarily weak yet. Just team coordination, stuff like that. Yeah. You do want a sentry gun on every single last hold you can have it on. Only time you don't want that gun up is when you're pushing out, and even then sometimes it's worth just leaving on last to make the push out safer. That's situational, but you want a sentry gun. I have theorized in the past a gun here on point. You know what, let's just go engineer so we can actually see what the guns cover, right? I have theorized a sentry gun on point here can be quite nice because, as you can see, all of top left is completely taken care of. Dungeon is pretty much taken care of. Someone could maybe theoretically peek it from this back corner, but this is just such a niche angle, and you can get spammed out from here as well. So I think it would be still a solid gun regardless of that potential dungeon spam, just because you can have a soldier hold that even easier than a soldier would hold, like Snake Water Lower, for instance, which is the favored door to spam down the Snake Water gun. In any case, what I do see most teams doing, however, is a gun top left. Sometimes it's like here even. This is actually very solid, I will say, because this is going to watch dungeon completely. You know, seeing this is definitely my favorite, because that's going to stop anything dungeon. You're not going to be able to take out that gun with just upward directs. And then maybe the back corner of back left it can get spammed out from. But this is just such an easy spammable position that that's going to be difficult to deal with. So I do think this is still a viable gun spot, but it does make sense why people like this a lot. And even... have I seen other guns set up? This is definitely more spammable from left, or from right rather, but it can actually help out the left side. This gun is only vulnerable if the other team gets control of this left side door, and then they can actually like spam it out. But that is already such a difficult thing to accomplish with a demo here. If they ever get that aggro as well, you could theoretically exchange into them. But for another big reason, that's just not very achievable. And that reason is the sniper class, which is the next thing we're going to talk about here. So sniper on this... oh, and I got a sniper rifle. Imagine that. So sniper on this last... on evens is very powerful. Just because... in order for a team to pressure this door, which is the actual door you pressure into last, they have to get through this corridor, meaning they have to peek this, so you can like maybe hug the corner. But point being, a sniper is just gonna shut that down. Same applies to the right side, kind of. This sniper would be very forward, but it's still hard to get through the door, and especially if there's a soldier playing with them, they should be relatively safe. But primarily top left, the sniper can be very brutal for another team to deal with. Although I suppose, has this geometry been changed? Because you can like hug the corner and the sniper has to be really committed out. But regardless, a sniper is going to be a massive pain to deal with, which can be tough. So, yeah, you could have your pocket scout on sniper with flank scout on engineer. You don't need a sniper on this last hold at all. You could just have a scout if you wanted. But you do absolutely need an engineer, without a doubt. That is clipping through. I noticed that over there. So yeah, demo's going to be top left with the combo, just bunkered up with his engineer. And then soldiers a little further away, just holding the other doors, coordinating who's holding what and stuff like that. And that's pretty much the evens hold on Sultry. So they could have a sniper themselves, but that doesn't really change the game plan like much at all. at least from a combo perspective, because they're not going to be able to peek dungeon anyway because of the sentry gun. So you really only have to worry about top left and right side. And then pretty much the only thing that changes from like a demo perspective, for instance, is instead of being able to peek into the door to spam or lock it out, you just have to kind of hold an angle, and the sniper can't cross that angle, and you just do a lot of carpeting and stuff like that. Just anti-sniper stuff in general. It will change what the soldiers do, because the soldiers are usually a priority target for snipers, ironically enough. I mean, of course, if you can just shoot and kill like the med or the demo, that's better, but usually soldiers are isolated, making them easier targets. And if you are standing on billboard here, then you are absolutely a target to a sniper in Valley who is quite far away, quite difficult to challenge. So you might need to hold a different kind of angle or something to hold this door adequately against that threat. So it does change the hold a bit for soldiers, but for the combo, it doesn't really affect your positioning too much because you're already kind of bunkered up close to the doorway, close to the entrances, which is usually what an anti-sniper hold looks like. Okay, I think that's about it for even Ubers. Now let's talk about pushing out. So, top left is a pretty natural way to enter lobby here. There's, of course, like sticky trap threats you have to worry about. There's hider threats you have to worry about. But it's still a pretty natural way to take lobby. And from here, you can really do whatever you'd like. If you wanted to... So, if you want to just pop out and play to flip-flop and try and catch players, then Shutter is a pretty natural door to do that, just because it is so close. You're like kind of cutting them off almost. Like if they were caught, you're really cutting them off with this positioning. You're already so deep. And if they're playing disad cheese, then they're pretty caught. Likewise, Bats is a solid pop-out door as well. For player, or for if they're playing like disad in a normal spot like choke or something. Cheese would not really be caught to that at all. And then Valley seems more like a dry push door, just because it is the furthest away. So, of course, anytime you dry any point, and I say this for every map, you have to look out for the normal stuff, like the bombing soldier that's sacking for the force and sticky traps and stuff like that. But it is a pretty approachable dry fight. It is low ground, but it's so far away that their spam is going to be pretty ineffective. Because if they're playing like a normal disad, like choke for instance, then they're not going to have very effective spam. I'm curious if you could play disad on point and then play to leave frog. You're just kind of caught to an Uber actually if they take it, so that probably wouldn't work out. Yeah, you have to play pretty passive here on the disad. I suppose you can kind of play... If you know they're coming Valley, then you could play on point and actually have effective spam. But even then, the choke is pretty far away, so you might be caught if they choose to take it. Yeah, disad... Holding disad on 2 actually seems pretty tough. Just because the doors are so spread out. Like, you could be playing cheese for like decent spam if they approach Valley, but you'd just be super caught to an Uber Shutter. Likewise, you could play on the point for like decent spam on a dry through Valley, but you would also just be like super caught if a team decided to use Shutter and cut you off. So I think spotting... Well, we'll talk about this when we talk about disad too. We're talking about pushing out at last. Yeah, Valley is a solid dry door, and you just want to establish positioning, take that point. You can... Any time you try to dry a point, if the other team is caught, it's usually just best to take your Uber. So in any of these doors, you might end up using, even if you were trying to dry. Shutter... doesn't seem super good for a dry push, honestly. I feel like you're better off drying through Bats. I think Bats is kind of like an intermediate door where you could just play to pop through, you could just play to dry it. Valley is definitely more leaning on the dry through side of things, and then Shutter is more leaning on the pop through, play a flip-flop side of things. Yeah, those are the basic doors. And then basic pushing out of last principles apply, where you, of course, have to clear stuff so you don't get backcapped. If they have a spy timing, meaning like someone died on last and had enough time to spawn spy and potentially threaten a backcap, then you might want to leave a player on last for that. If they're down a ton of people and you know you're going to be able to get through easily, but you're just worried about some like random rat chaos, then you could just leave your gun on last, because you're going to be able to push out anyway, even down that player. Just normal last push stuff. If you are planning to pop through, then you want a much more passive flank so that, you know, they don't get shoved on last, and when the Uber ends, then they can establish positioning. Whereas if you're planning to dry fight or dry push through, then you might want a more active flank, actually like being able to help out with the dry fight. Just all that is not Sultry specific, that just applies to TF2 in general. But I don't know if I've mentioned it before in previous map reviews. In any case, now that we are on second, let's talk about disad on our own second. So, a very natural place to want to be is bats. But this is actually pretty... It's inherently risky, I would say, because of this connection here from big door to shutter. I'm calling it big door. Cheese to shutter. So you cannot see them from bats. You don't know if anyone's coming cheese. You need that to get spotted, and even if it is spotted, like, that's hard for you to react to very quickly. A team could use through cheese and like wrap lobby effectively, or even just use through and bomb over here, and their demo could get a ton of damage potentially. So it's just pretty risky because of that. Likewise, shutter is just kind of a suicidal place to hold because you are so close to everything, and so close to cheese in particular. So for that reason, Valley is kind of the go-to disad positioning. You do have to worry about like a potential lobby wrap, but it's not a big threat. Basically, like, if you know it's happening, you can just leave and you'll be fine. But if you're not paying attention, then you could theoretically be caught. But you have some like nice little local high ground here from which you can get a little spam in before backing out after you send your soldier sack. And of course, on any disad hold, as far as positioning goes, so you want your combo backed by Valley. Soldiers can hold doors much closer. Usually you have your pocket soldier really like holding the door, playing to jump away when it actually gets shoved so they don't die, but they do trade out some health. And then your roamer, who at this point should be pretty healthy, is able to actually commit in. So an example of that could be, let's say you have your pocket playing on the fence, spamming out choke and frog, whichever they're choosing to go through. And if they're trying to dry choke, then, you know, they can spam, drop down, jump away, live. Meanwhile, your roamer, who may have been holding cheese, can then be bombing over, wall-shotting off this wall, and then just landing in them for the sack. Just, that's like a basic example of what that could look like. There's many different ways you can do that, but that's a basic approach to a disad hold, where you want to sack your soldier, try and get that force out, while everyone else spams to make the sack as good as possible and then leaves. So, yeah, playing Valley on the disad makes sense. You definitely, I think a flank scout spotting from shutter is totally fine. That makes sense, and maybe even helping out their roamer a little bit, but flank scout can't really hold doors. Alternatively, your flank scout could be building a gun on last if it's going to continue being disad, because that's just going to have that gun up faster, and they're probably going to be able to get it into a better position as a result. You will be down a player for the disad hold, but that's not the end of the world. And yeah, that's going to be disad on second. So let's talk about evens on second now. So the basic positioning is going to be combo on point on platform. Your demo is going to be primarily in charge of holding choke, and they are situated right next to frog as well. They can hold that adequately as well. And then your flank is mostly going to be in charge of holding cheese. Cheese is quite far away, but there's some nice little corners you can just spam people from. Just a little bit of high ground that players can play. And yeah, pretty simple stuff. This is a hold you might be down a roamer for sometimes while they're pressuring, just if they like pressure quickly off of your counter sack, in which case, you know, the pocket goes and does help out with that. But yeah, it's pretty simple, honestly. You might, if they rotate their combo over to meat, it might be worth, you know what, a demo actually here feels perfectly adequate. It might be more comfortable like here for denying the door, but I don't know if it's worth dropping off the high ground. I think you can still adequately spam out pressure from cheese from on top of point. So you do rotate your attention, but not really your body necessarily. Yeah, that makes this a very straightforward hold, honestly. There is the possibility of a sniper, namely like this sightline, which is admittedly just not very threatening. All that really can shoot at is like a soldier or a pocket scout on top of the fence. And even then they can just like rotate over to the side of the fence and not be threatened. I suppose a sniper could get some value if they got a peek off from cheese, maybe after like killing a roamer or something. But even then, that's not super threatening. It can work, but I don't think that's something so particular and unique to this point that you would need like a specific plan for it. It's just kind of basic anti-sniper principles. So yeah. Second hold, pretty straightforward, pretty easy to understand. Now let's talk about pushing into mid. So, you pretty much have a lot of options here. So, cheese is kind of a favorite door. Because, I mean, for the same reasons why it's a nice door to get through for a mid fight, it's a nice door to just dry through into mid, because it is so far away from everything as well that you just have nice vision on everything, and you can just really get established on the point, or in the point, not the actual capture objective, but the point mid itself. You can get a nice little positioning foothold, start taking that space, spam them out. It's a very nice door to dry through. Choke is fast. You can get through choke quickly. I think it's fine for drying through. It's like a little bit inferior to cheese if you had to choose between the two, but I think it is probably faster to just drop down point and just walk through choke as opposed to rotate all the way around and then walk through cheese. So it's definitely gonna be faster, which gives it a little bit of an edge in some situations, but it's a fine door to dry through, and honestly, it might be a decent door to pop through as well. Your demo's going to have a tough time getting reflashed because your combo's going to either have to walk around the tower that way or around the tower that way. So maybe for that reason, choke is not great for popping through, only if like they're caught and you know they're caught. So let's say, let us say, what is a good situation here? Let's say you send a counter sack and get the force, and with their Uber, let's say you lose 2 with the Uber, right? Or you lose 2 to get the force. So you're down 2, they're down only their roamer because it was a counter sack, so they're still down the roamer for the moment. And they decide, okay, the roamer's spawning and rolling out, they're going to pressure into your second. And let's say they choose to pressure through cheese, meaning they are now very deep for that pressure because they have those 2 picks. But let's say they overstay their welcome a little bit and they send their sack or whatever and it doesn't work out. On this rotation out, this is a long rotation out, you know as a team you can catch them with an Uber. But you're not just going to like follow them cheese and try and chase them that way. You're going to cut them off choke. That would be like a perfect example I can think of just using through choke. But it's a little niche, of course. If it's just a more generic type of situation, then yeah, you might prefer drying through cheese. Or if you were trying to just pop through to play a flip-flop, then I think frog is a more natural door for that. Just because it's a very natural path for your combo to walk up, to reflash your demo, and you're already so deep, you're already holding these important doors to lock them out as you are able to cap the point and then play disad as you would in a normal flip-flop situation. So yeah, choke, niche, has some uses, but it's just a matter of game sense, knowing when you want to go there. For most generic applications, cheese is a good door to dry through, and frog is a good door to pop through. Okay, now we are at, oh man, 45 minutes. I've done a lot of rambling. So let's talk about playing disad on mid now that we've taken mid. So all the normal disad stuff still applies. Where you want to like sack your soldier or have your soldiers hold the close doors, stuff like that. Cheese is also a natural door to leave through, actually, because again, you just have good vision and it's kind of far away, and as a result, you're just pretty much able to get out cleanly. There might be something to be said for, nah, frog is kind of bad, honestly. If the spam were better, then it might be better. And I'm thinking of an example like Snakewater Kitchen, for example, where you're much closer to Saw, which is a common door teams want to get through, and you have much better spam on Saw, but it's still not like caught necessarily to a Saw Uber. Frog does not seem like one of those cases. The spam is not that great. Yeah, I think pretty much always you want to be playing to leave cheese as a combo. And that should just be it for disad, honestly. I'm going to expedite things here a little bit because I do talk in depth about stuff that's not necessarily Sultry specific. So we covered disad mid. Now let's talk about evens on mid. So evens on mid, there's kind of two types of positionings. There's sack and there's counter sack, and I'm now realizing I didn't talk about sack, counter sack positioning on any of the other points. Last is really the only one it kind of matters. Whatever. We'll get to that later. So when you are, we'll do counter sack first because that's the closest thing to disad. You pretty much just want to be chilling like here. Your demo can be spamming out the point, spamming out cheese. Might have to give space cheese depending on how hard they pressure it, similar to a process choke where they can potentially pressure through choke really hard and your demo has to back up to point. That's totally fine as long as you're like spamming them out as you do so. They should not be able to stay in for very long. Like the other team should not be able to cross in here for very long without getting collapsed on and dying. But yeah, demo holding choke and cheese. Since you sacked, your pocket is going to be the only soldier alive, most likely, and they can pretty adequately be holding frog. And flank scout, I don't know if this is a point you double sack into or single sack. Let's just assume single sack for now, in which case your pocket or your flank scout would most likely be helping out your pocket, holding frog, and then pocket scout could be in any type of high ground to help deny a bomb. And then medic, just a step back from the demo. Normal counter sack stuff. Then I suppose if you double sack, you just would have your pocket soldier alone. Frog. Okay, now let's talk about sacking. You can totally pressure choke. And the choke pressure is pretty solid, actually, as a demo. Man, if you could just shoot random crits like that as well, that's a team wipe. As a demo, you have a very solid spam choke, actually, because you can just shoot over that fence and get nice spam on their combo, like their med and things. You can also deny the players on high ground that are there to deny your bomb, and you can spam out their demo as well. So the choke spam for a demo is very good. That's totally a solid door to pressure. Rotating the beam combo to pressure does not seem very good to me just because you are just going to get carpeted by a demo. There's just not a very positive damage trade to be had there. I don't think frog is a good place to go pressure. So that pretty much leaves choke and then cheese. And cheese is perfectly solid because it is much further away from their combo that once you spam out the players holding it, you really do have some space here to work with. Of course, you know, as I was talking about on second, as a demo, you can still be comfortable trading damage here, but it's still enough range to where you're perfectly comfortable playing this as the attacking team. And that's actually a pretty positive... Like, this is pretty nebulous positioning. It's not necessarily like you're encroaching on their territory. Like, you can kind of take this if you want. Just because unless their demo drops down and makes themselves more vulnerable, they're going to have a tough time, like, completely shutting you out. So, yeah. As far as your plans for what you want to do go, you have some options. So you could just send a soldier, whether they want to bomb through choke or maybe commit through frog is an option. You could probably even skip, like, ramp slide up here, land on point. Plans like that. Those all work. And alternatively, they could even probably high bomb around cheese or something. You can bomb from wherever if you just plan to send a soldier sack alongside pressure. That's totally fine. Another thing teams will like to do is send a player behind, and that's where this cheese to shutter connection being so close comes into play. You can totally pressure cheese, get rid of the players holding it, and then just have like a flank scout or a soldier or someone get behind, and from there's a nice pack awaiting them if they need it. And then from there, you have more options, whether they just want to recommit and sack while maybe your team rotates to another door to pressure or just continues pressuring. Maybe they just want to sack with that pressure, or maybe like they draw multiple people behind. A little fading thing, whatever. Maybe they draw like 2 people behind, right? And you want to just actually take some space off that. Maybe that's an option, and you try and do that choke or something. You can play that type of situation fluidly, but yeah, it's an option to get someone behind through shutter. Okay, now let's say you get the force, and let's start talking about pushing into second. So, considering the disad is usually back by Valley, I think you can... Man, Frog is actually looking kind of solid for this. Of course, a soldier could kind of shut you down somewhat, so that's a big thing to worry about. But as far as just pure positioning goes, it is nice to just be on the point already. I think choke is totally fine, and probably what a lot of teams will prefer as a default, just because it is so simple. You get to see so much. Choke is probably going to be the preferred door to get through, and it's just a very natural walk up to the point. And then cheese, I think, is totally fine as well. As a dry door, I think it's adequate. It doesn't really have anything that makes it particularly good for a dry, but it's adequate. I think this is probably the best pop through door. It depends, honestly. You can totally pop through and then chase lobby if they have bad positioning, or bomb over or whatever. Choke, I think, is an adequate pop through door as well, honestly, because it's very easy to get positioning on the point. And that seems like a more direct bomb and direct route for if they're holding Valley versus like a cheese bomb, which, I don't know. They're both fine. Cheese absolutely threatens like a lot more in lobby. You could maybe take a cheese Uber to try and cut them off here. That could be very good, actually. And that might edge cheese out, actually, as the preferred pop through door. But, yeah. So, that's pushing second. Now let's talk about holding second disad. And we were alluding to this earlier. It's not very good, honestly, because choke kind of seems like the door you have to play. It's very easy to be caught if you want to play a little forward for like better spam. Because, yeah, this is better spam Valley, but you're just going to be caught to an Uber shutter or probably even bats. So it seems like you're kind of destined to have pretty bad spam. I think identifying where their combo is going to matter a lot for this disad hold and just identifying where they're trying to go, because you might be able to get away with some better positioning and better spam and more like higher likelihood of getting a force when you know where they're coming from. But yeah, it kind of seems like choke is just kind of the place you have to be. Otherwise, there is some type of Uber, usually a shutter Uber, that catches players. So pretty simple stuff then. Let's talk about evens on second. And yeah, we'll start with counter sack. Counter sack, you pretty much just want to be on the point. This is a last you can double sack into, so I would imagine, I mean, demo just here like makes a lot of sense because you can adequately deny a lot of stuff. You might want to like rotate. That feels kind of isolated, honestly. Here's a pretty comfy positioning, where you just want to be able to spam people out that are trying to pressure for the force. And this is actually where I'll take the opportunity to talk about. So the positioning I was talking about for the evens hold, that was the sack positioning where you're expecting the other team to sack. For counter sack, you definitely want to take lobby space and actually pressure for your counter sack. And bats seems okay for that. Shutter seems like all these doors actually seem fine for pressure. Valley might be the best, honestly. But yeah, at the very least, you want to be taking lobby for that counter sack, which is the same situation we're talking about, but on the flip side. So yeah, you are going to be trying to deny that pressure. Probably have a pocket soldier. Honestly, here is very nice because you can watch and shoot at shutter if they open it, while also being able to spam out bats and also being able to, you know, maybe splash some people valley as well. So that seems like the best type of hold. Of course, pocket scout could be on high ground somewhere. And then medic on the point, just trying to wait out that bomb, because you will be down your flank most likely if you double sacked. Okay, with that, let's talk about pressuring into last with a sack. So this is a tough last to pressure into. We did talk about the gun, and I guess you could spam down the gun from this angle, so I think a good plan would be maybe rotate, what would it be? Probably, I'm just trying to figure out, you would want both soldiers to pressure this guy out and then spam down this gun. The trouble is, I don't even know if this guy is like splashable, because if you're trying to splash this and he's just standing here, that's not going to hit him. You would need a direct, in which case you might want a demo to be spamming that out first, maybe while a soldier holds lobby, and then the demo and the soldier switch positions so the demo can hold lobby while your soldiers get into position off that timing interval and spam down the gun. Something like that might work, and you would rotate your combo over valley side to do that. That could be an option for spamming down the gun. Something a lot of teams actually do on this last, and this is kind of what popularized the sap and sack strategy, where you have a spy that's goal is primarily to sap this sentry so that a soldier can then bomb from lower, and the medic is right there and the soldier's right on top of them. That should be an easy force. And that's kind of the disadvantage to a lot of last holds, where the medic is very forward, very vulnerable, and the only thing preventing the medic from dying or getting forced is the gun, is that that spy sap with a soldier sack can be quite effective. So that's a very popular strategy on this last. Of course, you can kind of bully top right. You have to worry about that sniper. But if you can deal with that adequately, then top right is totally something you can pressure adequately. And you can snipe yourself. There are some very solid sniper sightlines I was talking about earlier, where you can, you know, target that soldier up there, maybe take some space left side. Sniper is a very solid class into this last, so that is an option. But those are your main options for what you want to do into this last hold. Of course, you could just rip an exchange as well. And honestly, an exchange might be solid here, because if their gun is this close, just because that means their NG is going to be close as well, and that means their NG might be a vulnerable target and a big liability in an exchange. Because if you can kill an engineer during an exchange, then you can totally take like a post fight and be pretty happy with that player pick, no sentry gun, stuff like that. There might be a gun spot like further back here where their NG is not as much of a target to an exchange, but in those cases, it's going to be much more spammable from back right, and you can exploit that more. So there's trade-offs. I think that's pretty much all I have to say about disad on, or what am I talking about sacking into last. Now let's talk about pushing into last. So top right is a door you can use through, and that gives very natural positioning. You can think of this similar to like a sunshine top right, which is usually like a default door that people like to take Ubers through. I think this is much worse than a sunshine top right because it's just like such a long sight line. If they do have like a weird type of sniper, then you would have to use much earlier. But it's a fine door to use through, honestly. It's just very intuitive because of like its resemblance to sunshine. Left side is usually a go-to dry door where you want to take some space before using. Trying to think of some analogs. Honestly, it might be similar to a Snakewater left side in that regard, where it's usually pretty far from where the other team's holding, and you might want to take some space before using. Of course, you do have to worry about a sniper in the spawn if you commit too deep, the same way you would have to on Snakewater, but I think it could have similar uses. And then usually the default pop-through door on this map is actually dungeon. Most maps that like have a dungeon into last, like Sunshine, it's more of a fast transition door where you're trying to catch people off guard with some specific timings. But this dungeon is actually pretty solid because it's pretty deep in. Of course, it is low ground, but you're using through. And your demo has the option to bomb to either side, depending on what they see. And it's pretty easy to catch up to them, even if they just land on the point. Before picking a side, like it's very easy to get them flashed, and well, you don't want to land on the point because it's trapped, but you get the idea. Yeah, good default door to pop through, gives you a lot of options with the Uber, just very important. Same thing applies to a Snakewater lower Uber. If the demo is choosing a side to bomb to, which they usually will, it's very important to stay coordinated and actually communicate that, because the last thing you want is your combo splitting between the sides. You still want to pick a side and either end on that side or cross if you can. Most of the time you're going to be ending on the same side, I think, on this last, just because you are like picking it early on. But yeah, that's a good default door to pop through. I can talk about a lot more specifics here, but I think I've been going on long enough. We are just breaching the 1 hour mark, which I think is not too bad compared to some of the others where I do just really go into specifics. But I don't have too many specifics about Sultry, given that I've only really watched it been played. And honestly, the meta might be a little underdeveloped, I think. Because I think there is some stuff that teams could experiment with and maybe see some success with. But in any case, that's a quick little primer for Sultry. Did I miss anything? I don't know if I did. Yeah, I think I'm good to call it there. So, hopefully that was useful. I don't know if there's any other maps on the table that I have to talk about. But if I do, I'm sure I'll get those done. And yeah, have a good one, folks.